What's up everybody, this is Master Ian Gamer. Microsoft buying Activision-Blizzard has been all the talk recently, but one aspect of this acquisition which I haven't really seen being discussed that much is how it'll impact franchises like Overwatch, specifically with regards to Microsoft's Game Pass service. For those of you who don't know, Game Pass is a subscription service offered by Microsoft, which allows players to pay a monthly fee to gain access to a whole host of different games on their service. Essentially, it's the video game version of Netflix. And while I already made a video discussing why franchises Microsoft has recently acquired with this purchase likely won't end up becoming Xbox exclusives, that doesn't mean that Microsoft won't start treating these games as if they were. And specifically, I'm talking about them optimizing these games for Game Pass. In general, subscription services like Game Pass can be a bit iffy. Whether it's a service for games, movies, shows, whatever, having this sort of blanket subscription that gives you access to more content than you could ever realistically hope to consume in your entire life does come with a number of pros and cons. Perhaps one of the most significant aspects of this when it comes to any specific title that exists within one of these subscription systems is that no individual game, show, or movie has to necessarily be able to carry itself financially. In the good old brick and mortar days where you had to walk to a physical store to purchase a game to play on your Xbox, PC, PlayStation, whatever, every individual game you would buy from the store had to be good enough on its own to justify you spending money on it. Otherwise, there's no reason for you to buy that game. But then when it comes to a subscription service where you pay for essentially a collection of content as opposed to any individual things, suddenly the value of each individual title you have access to becomes greatly diminished. What this means is that a lot of games can, how should I put this, get away with being really, really bad. This is something which I think we see most when it comes to services like Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus, where the companies that own them can sort of get away with dumping just a whole bunch of garbage onto their services that very few people would actually want to spend money on watching, because it still has value as just inflating the amount of content available on their streaming service. Every single show and movie they put out doesn't have to be a massive slam dunk, because the few slam dunks which do exist will essentially carry the platform, which means that the rest of the content, which makes up the bulk of their catalogs, can basically get away with just being awful garbage. And so it stands to reason that the same thing could happen with a service like Game Pass. Even if currently Game Pass is teeming with high quality, really fun games that a lot of people want to play, what's to say that 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, we won't see it end up in a state similar to that of Netflix, where the number of games on it worth playing are vastly outnumbered by hundreds if not thousands of truly underwhelming filler titles. But even if it doesn't end up so bad as for Overwatch to fit into this garbage filler content category, another important aspect of Game Pass and these types of services is how it incentivizes the flavor of the month player mentality. By flavor of the month, I mean that any new game that pops up on Game Pass, or even if it's an old game that's just coming new to the service, will be seen as this fresh, new, and exciting thing that everyone's gonna get hyped about, but then after about roughly a month, everybody's played the game, there's probably a new game that's come out at that point, so they move on from that original title. Already, it seems like this is a very common trend on Game Pass with many of the titles that end up going to it, and while there's nothing inherently wrong with this type of player mentality, I mean, heck, it's a thing that's been around since long before Game Pass ever existed, but I'm worried we're going to start seeing this flavor of the month game mentality become even more mainstream. So much so that companies like Microsoft, who have a service which specifically caters to this flavor of the month style of game, might decide that they only need to bother producing games that'll keep players interested for a month or two. Because even with the insane increase to potential resources for franchises like Overwatch, now that they're under Microsoft leadership, ultimately the company could decide that it's better off spreading those resources out to various separate projects, giving each one enough funding and development time to make a game that'll be relevant for the intended window of playtime, before cutting them off because it's seen as a better investment to start investing in a different game than to continue making the first game any better than that. For people like myself, and likely you if you're watching this video, this could prove devastating for the way we enjoy many games. For me personally, Overwatch is a game which I have been enjoying non-stop for years at this point. Even through the past couple years and the heavy content drought the game has endured, I've still found myself enjoying Overwatch at its core because of just how replayable it is and how good the game is at its very center. The game fundamentally has incredibly fun and interesting characters, game modes, and mechanics that I've been able to enjoy it for years on end. But what if going forward, Microsoft determines that these sorts of aspects in a game just aren't important anymore because it's more lucrative and appeals to more people when you design games that are simply fun for a month and then can essentially disappear off the market? Just think of the way Call of Duty games have been structured, where there's a new one that comes out every year, but instead of an annual release period for the game, it's a monthly release period, at the cost of the game itself being significantly watered down and made a lot less enjoyable in the long run. And I'm sure it sounds silly, the idea of there being a new Overwatch game every month from here till the end of time, let's just say, but it wouldn't end up manifesting that way. It wouldn't be a new Overwatch game every month. It would be a new Overwatch game every few years, with other franchises and IPs filling in the monthly interval gaps between them. If Game Pass as a service model really catches on like Microsoft clearly wants it to, then we could see the death of the live service game model entirely in favor of a more fast-paced Call of Duty periodic new game release system, where each new game that comes out is developed with the idea of planned obsolescence after only a couple months. Perhaps the Overwatch IP will be relegated to a mere token that Microsoft plays every few years in order to feed the cycle of excitement for new content on the platform, as opposed to actually building up the Overwatch franchise into a great, solid, long-lasting game. Now, at this point in the video, I'm sure my reservations when it comes to Game Pass-like services have started to show through, but I don't think it's fair for me to be purely critical of these types of services because there are certainly some potential benefits we could see with a service like this as well. For one thing, going off the same thing I said earlier, where every individual game within a Game Pass-like service doesn't necessarily need to be able to financially carry itself, can actually result in some rather interesting benefits. Most notably is that it allows specific development teams to get away with some very experimental type games. Quirky gameplay mechanics and themes within games that normally you might only see in low-profile indie games could potentially become the focus of larger development studios, given that they're not so heavily dependent on having each title they put out making a ton of money. Just imagine if a competent, high-profile dev team was given the time and resources to really experiment with some abnormal, atypical ideas within video games. That could ultimately lead to a lot of innovation within the gaming sphere that ultimately could result in massive steps forward for the entire industry. This is something that we've already seen TV and movie streaming services begin to tap into with things like Choose Your Own Adventure movies and even Netflix's Arcane. Considering the history of video game-inspired TV shows and movies, it's kind of miraculous that Arcane ended up being as good and successful as it was. And I'm willing to bet that it's in large part due to the fact that Netflix could afford to let the show be very experimental and try something that doesn't typically work well, which this time resulted in something fantastic. So who's to say that a service like Game Pass couldn't produce similar results in the gaming sphere? Just imagine what the Overwatch dev team could potentially do with Overwatch 2 and other games later down the line in the franchise if they don't have to be so concerned about their game specifically hitting some sort of revenue target. Needless to say, I think we can all agree that services like Game Pass are very much a new frontier of sorts when it comes to gaming. Obviously, I have quite a few reservations about the service, and given the past track records of services like this when it comes to TV shows and movies, I'm certainly skeptical about where Microsoft might go with it. It seems all too easy for them to just end up following the path of most profit, which ultimately is only going to end up hurting us as the players, but at the same time, there could certainly be some big benefits and improvements to the entire gaming industry along the way. Let me know your thoughts on all this though in the comments down below. Are you excited to see a game like Overwatch go to Game Pass? Pass in the probably pretty near future? Or are you concerned about what might end up happening to the franchise if Microsoft begins focusing so heavily on these types of services? I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, follow me on Twitter, hit up that bell icon, and come join my Discord server to hang out and never miss any of my future Overwatch content. Special thanks to my YouTube channel members who help make these videos possible, and if you'd like to join them for some cool rewards, then just hit that join button down below. Otherwise, this is Master Ian Gamer signing off, and until next time, have a great day.